Five, four, three, two, one.
And welcome to Pomum's Adoctrination Chamber. Today, more pedantic than ever, because, been thinking for a while. Yeah, it's obviously easier to just make content about video games and about anime series and all that, because I know it's more popular on the internet, it's more popular on YouTube. But if I have any hold on anyone, then I'd rather force them to go through the kind of things that maybe they don't know so much about. And one of those is French literature. I'm no concrete expert on French literature. I actually think it's one of the countries that maybe I know the least about their literature. Especially compared to what it is in a total, but that's exactly why I want to talk about it, because I think it's going to be easier than going into, something I know a lot about and maybe have to dissect into different parts. So I can just talk widely about my favorite books in French literature and my recommendation for you. So the first one that I have to make here is one of my favorite books, Les Miserables, by Victor Hugo. Is one of the highest forms of historical literature ever. It tells a very, very long story, five different perspectives, not really, five different parts, and many more perspectives, not even only five, even though it is true that each of those five parts are more focused on one character. It has gotten adaptations everywhere. It has a very good musical that I didn't watch. I started watching it, but then I was watching it with my family and everyone went to sleep, so I did too. That's just what happens. But it looked very good. I also know there's a manga adaptation, strangely well received, so I'm assuming it's also pretty decent. And the book, however, the book has to be one of the best things I've ever seen. Very humane characters, makes the most out of its setting, which is the French Revolution. It was written on the 19th century, but it tells the story of, kind of like a century ago, end of the 18th century. And as I said, incredibly well written. Although I do have to warn you, it's very long, over 1,000 pages. At least in the edition I got when I read it. Then we have Michel Strogoff by Jules Verne. Verne was an incredibly insightful author for the 19th century, mainly focused on adventure novels. And he had a very, very, very strong focus on science and a scientific accuracy of the things that were happening. This time he writes about a messenger in Russia during the times of the Tsar, which isn't exactly a scientific thing, although it is very accurate as to what a messenger would probably experience during those times. But most of his works, like Journey to the Center of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Around the World in 80 Days, they focus on large scale group efforts to achieve something new in the field of science. And the thing is, Jules Verne was kind of considered a bit of a prophet in his time, because he predicted things that were assumed to not be able to be done, like going 20,000 leagues under the sea or going around the world in 80 days. And maybe the most important one, being able to land on the moon. The only thing that Jules Verne predicted that hasn't been done yet is Journey to the Center of the Earth, which I still think maybe he went a bit too far there, because according to him, in the center of the Earth there's dinosaurs. But yeah, Jules Verne is a detailed author, sometimes to an exhausting degree. However, he writes very well, it's very well written, and all the things he tells you about, like I remember 2 whole pages talking about the type of fishes you can find in the Mediterranean Sea, they add to the flavor of the novel, which is written with almost like surgical care. Even if he has a focus on science, with Michel Strogoff he shows that he can hold historical or even absolutely fictional novels like Journey to the Center of the Earth with no problem. Michel Strogoff is, yes, I cared for the characters, I think they were presented very well, that the plot was executed very well, and yeah, yes, how an adventure novel should be. Then we have different century, next century, La Nausée or Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre was mostly known for his work in philosophy, but he did write some philosophical tone novels. This one is from a personal first-person experience, so kind of an autobiographical thing. Him and Camus basically carried the philosophy of the 20th century for France, and yeah, the Nausea is about boredom and disassociation with the world, and about losing interest about everything. It's not exactly pessimistic, it's a very good read, quite lighter than you might imagine, like it's not going to leave you depressed, and also much shorter than the previously mentioned. So if you want something light to go through and to maybe be able to brag about reading, then Nausea is always relevant. Yeah, I just find it to be very good, and kind of, you know, relatable, maybe a bit more relatable than the previous two. Then we have The Human Comedy by Honoré de Balzac. The Human Comedy is not a novel, it's a series of novels that are made to be a portrait of the French people, and especially the French nobility or high class during the 19th century. It's acid, it's quite negative. I mean, these are French people we're talking about, so they don't really like their nobility all the way. Honoré de Balzac was a noble to a certain degree, but he still didn't like the novels. Even if the novels are negative, they are still beautiful. This work is incredibly extensive. It has over 50 novels. I haven't read all of them. I have only read the most well-known. My personal recommendation, if you want to read one, would be Eugénie Grandet. I thought this one was very good, and it also talks about the relevance of money and how money moves the world, which, again, very relevant still to this day. But I know the most well-known and the most well-appreciated by the critic is Old Man Garriot, which is, you know, about how becoming old can affect someone, and it's also very good. I still appreciate the female perspective of Eugénie Grandet, although, well, you know, it's written by a man, but the female protagonist is very well done. Now, taking a different turn, we have Consolation by Anna Gavalda. This is a 21st century hidden gem for me. It was a bestseller, but still a hidden gem because it's not talked about enough. It has some experimental writing at times, so it can be a hard read. It's about an architect that lives in Paris, that finds himself in some difficulty, interacts with different people, people talking with people novel. Doesn't really have a drive, just like life. And at some point in the novel, there's a say where there's a girl in a restroom and she reads something in the wall, and it reads, "Life is shit, and then you die." And yeah, I guess consolation is just that simple. Is life is shit, and then you die. Is there something in between? It can be maybe the most relatable read out of those I'm going to recommend due to the setting. I still think, yeah, maybe except for the Nausea. Nausea is, very good and doesn't really, like, the setting doesn't really matter that much. It can apply to today. But Consolation, when they are talking about high buildings, skyscrapers, and that the setting is definitely modern Paris, so one can put himself in the place of the protagonist much easier than maybe other characters. Then we also have Le Rouge et le Noir, The Red and the Black by Stendhal. This would be your classical story of a pretentious poor man that puts himself into the habit and believes himself to be a hero. It's quite explicit at times, if I remember correctly, but still tasteful. Like, don't expect anything like Sade, which I'm not going to recommend, but Sade exists. I haven't read Sade, so I wouldn't recommend it. Both plot and writing in Le Rouge et le Noir shine. Like, there's really no weak point. The plot is very well constructed. You understand the perspective of the protagonist. You still don't feel like the protagonist is a softie in any way at all. The secondary characters also behave in a very believable way, and the way it's written, and the quotes and the phrases and the ending is all very well constructed, very, very solid read. I know there's another book by Stendhal, The Charterhouse of Parma, that is considered to be as good, but even though I got it as a gift, I just haven't read it yet. I'm not going to say I haven't had the time, I just didn't read it because I didn't get to it. So yeah, that's a thing. We also have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. Madame Bovary is the also popular plot of a high-class woman that gets a young lover, is continuously compared to parallels in Russian literature with Anna Karenina and in Spanish literature with La Regenta. But this one, Madame Bovary, is much more sweet and romanticized. Like, you still shouldn't come in here expecting a tale that is going to leave anyone in a good place. Like, each and every one of the people that appear in this story can be described as bad people, but it's beautifully written and also quite short compared to the others. So I think it stands as a different type of work. Really, Madame Bovary, Anna Karenina, and La Regenta, even though I understand the comparisons because they are obvious, they are obviously the same in some aspects, they have very different qualities to them. La Regenta is the darkest. Anna Karenina maybe is the one that leaves you with the most hope, but also is much more centered on the historical setting. Madame Bovary happens in a very, very small town, so the setting matters the least, but the strength of the characters just carries everything. Shouldn't reach the 200 pages, as I said, quite short, and yeah, a good book. Next recommendation from me would be The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Dumas is mostly known for The Three Musketeers and also 20 Years Later, which is like the second part of The Three Musketeers. You should also read The Three Musketeers because of their relevance to popular culture, along with The Black Tulip, if you are doing this. The Black Tulip is also by Dumas. The Count of Monte Cristo is an adventure novel, like the kind of stories that Dumas got to write. Dumas was a writer for money. He wrote for a newspaper, and he specialized on leaving each of the chapters with a to be continued that just made you want to read the next part. He's very good at doing that. But in the Count of Monte Cristo, I think he bothers taking higher risks. The characters are... Yeah, people in the Count of Monte Cristo are strongly characterized, and because of that they become archetypes that are very present even in modern culture. If you like revenge plots, this is definitely the one for you. And to end with, Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, is an absolutely beautiful read, purely aesthetic. Although it's riddled with meaning, the story can just be enjoyed as a children's tale. I remember reading it as a child, and also my sisters did. I do this comparison a lot. I think Le Petit Prince is like the French Alice in Wonderland, because of the relevance it has with young adults and symbolism, although with less of a Disney take and more of the aesthetics that come along with the author's illustrations. The author was the one to do the illustrations for the original book, and since then they have been considered so relevant for the plot that the illustrations appear in basically every edition of the book that I've seen. It's probably one of the most readable books to be ever made. I think I've read it like 5 times, and yeah, it's one of those, the more you read it, the more you get from it books. Yes, a beautiful one. And yeah, that's going to do it for the recommendations for this month, and I hope to see you on the next month. Bye.